The mountains never forget a debt. Neither do wolves. Catherine Morgan knew both truths intimately as she stood at her cabin's threshold, the wilderness stretching before her like an open wound. The scars on her heart matched the jagged peaks that had become her refuge, a place where broken things came to either heal or disappear entirely. She hadn't yet decided which fate she sought. 5 months of solitude had taught her the language of silence, how to breathe without making a sound, how to move through the world like a ghost, leaving no trace, how to kill the yearning for connection that occasionally stirred in her chest during the longest hours of night. But some instincts refused to die, no matter how deeply buried. The storm howled like a wounded beast, rattling the shutters of Catherine's cabin. 3 days it had raged, trapping her inside with dwindling firewood and the constant reminder of how utterly alone she was. Outside, snow piled against the walls, a soft prison of white that seemed determined to bury her in her memories. Catherine stoked the dying embers in her fireplace, hands calloused from months of surviving on her own. At 32, her face had grown leaner, the softness of her former life carved away by isolation and grief. Her dark hair, once falling freely around her shoulders, now hung in a practical braid down her back. The lines around her eyes spoke of squinting into desert sun and mountain glare alike, reminders of two very different lives. "Just a little longer," she whispered to the flames, a habit born from too much silence. Her own voice sounded strange to her ears these days, an artifact from another time when words had purpose and audience. The wind screamed in response, finding new cracks in the cabin's weathered frame. Catherine pulled her threadbare sweater tighter around her shoulders. Winter had proven crueler than she'd anticipated when she'd purchased this forgotten corner of the Rockies with her military pension and the life insurance money she couldn't bear to spend in civilization. A sharp crack echoed outside, distinct from the storm's chaos. Catherine froze, listening. There it was again. Not the wind, but something solid against wood. Someone at her door. No one knew she was here. No one had reason to come this far into the wilderness, especially during a storm like this. Catherine reached for the hunting knife she kept on the mantel, its handle worn smooth from her grandmother's hands before hers. Her pulse quickened, military training rising to the surface like muscle memory. The knock came again, more desperate this time. "Who's there?" she called, knife gripped tight. No answer, only another weak thump against the door. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she approached. Caution had kept her alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan and 5 months in this unforgiving wilderness. But something in that pathetic knocking tugged at her, reminding her of the woman she'd been before grief had hollowed her out, a combat medic who never turned away from suffering. Taking a deep breath, Catherine unlocked the door and pulled it open a crack. No one, just swirling snow and darkness. She was about to close the door when a soft whimper drew her eyes downward. There, half buried in the snow, lay a small, dark shape. A wolf cub, barely more than a few months old, its gray fur matted with ice and blood. Catherine stared in disbelief. Wolves rarely approached human dwellings, and never alone, especially not the young. Yet here was this cub, trembling on her doorstep, golden eyes reflecting the firelight from within. "Where's your mother?" she whispered, scanning the tree line for glowing eyes. Nothing but darkness and falling snow answered her. The cub whimpered again, trying to rise on shaking legs before collapsing. A streak of red stained the snow beneath it. Catherine hesitated. Taking in a wild animal was foolish, dangerous even. But leaving it to die seemed crueler somehow. "I must be losing my mind," she muttered, setting the knife aside and kneeling. The cub growled weakly as her hands approached, showing tiny teeth in defiance despite its state. I know. I'm not thrilled about this either," Catherine said softly. "But you'll die out here." Carefully, she scooped the cub into her arms, surprised at how light it was. It struggled briefly before going still, too exhausted to fight. Up close, she could see the wound on its hind leg, a clean slice, too precise to be from another animal. A trap, perhaps, or worse, a deliberate cut from a hunter's blade. Catherine carried the cub inside, kicking the door shut behind her. The warmth of the cabin seemed to revive the animal slightly, its golden eyes flickering open to regard her with suspicion. "Those eyes," Catherine whispered, startled by their unusual color. Most wolf cubs had blue eyes that gradually changed to yellow or amber, but this one's eyes were a deep, burnished gold, almost metallic in their intensity, too intelligent for a normal animal. She set the cub down on a blanket near the fire and fetched water and what few medical supplies she had. The wound wasn't deep, but had bled considerably. Gently, she cleaned away the dried blood, speaking softly as she worked. This might sting, she warned, applying a homemade salve of herbs she'd learned to make from her grandmother, the family's healer, before everything fell apart. The cub snapped at her fingers, surprisingly quick despite its weakened state. "I'm trying to help you, you ungrateful little beast," Catherine scolded, though there was no real anger in her voice. Something about the cub's defiance struck a chord in her, that desperate fight to survive against overwhelming odds. Once the wound was cleaned and wrapped in strips of clean cloth, Catherine offered the cub water in a shallow bowl. It eyed her suspiciously before lapping at the water with desperate thirst. "Food next," she said, rummaging through her meager supplies. She found some dried venison, softened it in warm water, and offered a small piece. The cub sniffed cautiously before snatching the meat from her fingers, devouring it in 2 quick bites. "Hungry, aren't you? Wonder how long you've been out there." Catherine fed the cub a bit more, careful not to give too much at once. "And where is your pack?" As if in answer, a distant howl rose above the storm, so faint she almost missed it. The cub's ears pricked forward, its body suddenly tense. Catherine moved to the window, peering into the darkness. Wolves were common in these mountains, but they rarely ventured so close to human dwellings, even one as isolated as hers. Another howl, closer this time, and different from the first, a deeper, more resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the cabin. She glanced back at the cub, who was now attempting to stand despite its injury. "Oh, no, you don't," she said, returning to the animal's side. "You're in no condition to go anywhere." The cub growled but settled back onto the blanket, golden eyes fixed on the door. Catherine sat beside it, stroking its fur softly. "You can stay until morning," she told it. "Then we'll see about finding your family." She didn't know why she was talking to the animal as if it could understand her. Perhaps 5 months of solitude had affected her more than she realized. Or perhaps there was something about those golden eyes that seemed to hold comprehension beyond that of a normal wolf. The storm continued through the night, but the howls did not return. Catherine slept fitfully in her chair beside the fire, waking often to check on her unexpected guest. By morning, the cub's fever had broken, and it accepted food and water with less suspicion, though its golden gaze remained watchful. As the first light of dawn filtered through the shutters, Catherine rose to peer outside. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a pristine landscape of untouched white. No tracks, no signs of wolves or anything else. Just endless snow and silence. When she turned back to the cub, she found it watching her with those uncanny eyes. "Well, looks like you're stuck with me for now," she said. "Can't send you out there on that leg." The cub made no response, but somehow Catherine sensed its agreement. She sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. "I must be going crazy, taking in a wolf and talking to it like it's a person." Still, as the days passed, Catherine found herself growing attached to the small creature. She named it Orion, after the hunter in the stars her father had taught her to identify when she was a girl. The cub's wound healed quickly, too quickly, she thought, for a normal animal, and soon it was limping around the cabin, exploring every corner with cautious curiosity. Catherine used the respite in the weather to venture out for more firewood and to check her snares. She found rabbit tracks in the snow and followed them, knowing fresh meat would help Orion regain his strength. But as she moved deeper into the forest, she noticed other tracks, human footprints made by heavy boots, and strange drag marks that spoke of equipment being hauled through the snow. Hunters, perhaps, though hunting season was months past, or rangers, though she'd never seen any this far from the main trails. Catherine followed the tracks for a short distance, her military instincts on alert. They led to a small clearing where the snow was trampled by multiple sets of boots. In the center lay the remains of a fire, recently doused. Catherine crouched beside the ashes, touching them with her fingertips. Still warm. Whoever had been here was close. Something glinted in the snow nearby. Catherine reached for it, brushing away the powder to reveal a small metal dart with an unusual silver tip, not standard hunting equipment. She pocketed it, unease building in her chest. That night, as she prepared a meager stew with the rabbit she'd caught, Catherine examined the dart more closely. The construction was sophisticated, balanced for accuracy, with a hollow chamber in the shaft that could hold some kind of liquid. The tip was pure silver, honed to a wicked point. Orion growled from his place by the fire, backing away when she held the dart too close to him. "You don't like this, do you?" Catherine said, noting his reaction. "What is it? What are these people hunting?" The answer came sooner than she expected, and in a form she could never have anticipated. 3 days after finding Orion, Catherine woke in the dead of night to strange sounds coming from beside the fireplace. Soft whimpers, but higher, almost human in their distress. She reached for her knife and slowly approached the dying embers. Where Orion had been sleeping on his blanket, a child now lay curled in pain. A boy, no more than 7 years old, with a mop of dark hair and skin pale as moonlight. His small body shook with spasms as Catherine watched in disbelief, the knife slipping from her fingers to clatter on the wooden floor. The sound startled the boy. He looked up, and Catherine gasped. His eyes were the same burnished gold as Orion's, wide with fear and confusion. "It hurts," he whispered, his voice rough as if long unused. "The change hurts." Catherine's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. And yet the evidence lay before her, impossible to deny. The wolf cub she had rescued was somehow this child, or the child was the wolf. Either way, the world as she understood it had just shifted on its axis, but her medical training overrode her shock. A child was in pain. That was the only relevant fact at the moment. "Where does it hurt?" she asked, kneeling beside him, hands already reaching to assess. "Everywhere," the boy whimpered. "When the moon rises full, we change, but I'm too young to control it." "You're Orion," Catherine said. Not a question, but a confirmation of the impossible. The boy shook his head, weakly. "Elias," he corrected. "My name is Elias. They took me from my mother." "Who took you?" "The silver men. They hurt us, study us." His small face contorted in another spasm of pain. "Please help. I don't want to change again." "Not yet. Too weak." Catherine's medical mind raced. If what she was seeing was real, and despite all logic, she believed it was, then this boy's body was caught in some kind of transformation process. His muscles would be tearing and reforming, his skeletal structure shifting. The pain would be excruciating. She hurried to her supplies, grabbing the strongest painkiller she had, leftovers from an old prescription after a climbing accident. She crushed half a pill into powder and mixed it with water. "Drink this," she said, returning to his side. "It will help with the pain." Elias complied, grimacing at the bitter taste. Catherine watched as his breathing slowly steadied, the worst of the spasms subsiding. She wrapped him in a blanket, his small body still trembling. "You saved me," he said, golden eyes fixed on her face. "The silver men would have found me if you hadn't." "These silver men," Catherine said carefully, "they're the ones hunting in the forest. With silver weapons?" Elias nodded, his eyelids growing heavy as the medication took effect. "They know silver hurts us, stops the healing, makes us weak." His voice was fading as exhaustion claimed him. "My pack will be looking for me. The Alpha, he'll come." His words trailed off as he drifted into sleep, leaving Catherine alone with questions that had no rational answers. She sat beside the sleeping child, watching the rise and fall of his chest, trying to reconcile what she had seen with what she knew of the world. By morning, Elias was a wolf cub again. If not for the torn blanket and the lingering effect of the painkiller evident in the cub's drowsy movements, Catherine might have convinced herself she'd dreamed the entire episode. But the dart in her pocket was real. The tracks in the forest were real. And the golden-eyed cub watching her with too much intelligence was very, very real. "Elias," she said softly, and the cub's ears pricked forward in recognition. "What have I gotten myself into?" Over the next few days, Catherine kept a close watch on Orion, Elias, and ventured into the forest with greater caution. Twice she spotted men moving through the trees at a distance, heavily equipped and traveling in pairs. They carried rifles with specialized scopes and what looked like tranquilizer guns. Not regular hunters then. Something else. Something that made her blood run cold. At night, she heard distant howls, growing closer with each passing day, searching howls that called and waited for an answer. Elias would grow agitated at these sounds, pacing the cabin until Catherine was forced to secure him inside for fear he would injure himself trying to respond or escape. She knew she should probably try to release him, to let him find his pack. But something held her back. The memory of those men in the forest with their silver weapons. The thought of Elias, vulnerable and injured, falling into their hands. And if she was honest with herself, the selfish comfort of having another living being near after so many months alone. On the seventh day after finding Elias, Catherine returned from checking her snares to find boot prints in the snow around her cabin. Large prints from a man with a long stride, circling the structure as if searching for a way in. Her pulse quickened as she slipped inside, relieved to find Elias still there, watching the door with alert eyes. "We had a visitor," she told him, securing the lock and drawing the curtains. "Did they try to come in?" Elias growled, his fur bristling along his spine. That night, Catherine slept with her hunting rifle beside her bed, waking at every creak of the cabin's timbers. The howls in the forest had stopped. The silence was somehow worse. She was dreaming of Afghanistan, the heat, the dust, the constant vigilance, when a crash jolted her awake. For a moment, she was back in the field hospital, incoming wounded, but then reality snapped into focus. Her cabin. Night, the sound of splintering wood. Someone was breaking in. Catherine seized her rifle and rolled to her feet in one fluid motion, muscle memory from her training taking over. Elias was already at the door, hackles raised, a growl rumbling from his small body. "Stay back," she hissed, moving to the wall beside the door where she would have the advantage when it opened. The lock was giving way, the wood around it splitting under tremendous force. No normal man could exert that kind of pressure. With a final crack, the door burst open. A massive silhouette filled the frame. A man, broad-shouldered and tall, his outline somehow wrong in subtle ways she couldn't immediately process. He stepped inside, and moonlight from the broken door illuminated features that sent a chill through Catherine's core. His eyes glowed the same burnished gold as Elias's, but set in a face that was all hard angles and primal ferocity. A face that belonged to a predator wearing human skin. He moved with unnatural grace for his size, scanning the cabin until his gaze locked on Elias. The cub had stopped growling and stood frozen, recognition evident in his posture. "Step away from him," Catherine said, her rifle aimed at the intruder's chest. Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I don't know what you are, but I will shoot." The man turned those golden eyes on her, and Catherine felt a primitive part of her brain scream in warning. This was no ordinary threat. This was something ancient and dangerous, something from humanity's oldest nightmares. "You have something that belongs to my pack, human," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate in her bones. "The boy, step aside." "He was injured," Catherine replied, not lowering her weapon. "I've been caring for him." "I know, I can smell your medicine on him." The man's nostrils flared slightly. "And your scent on his fur. You've been kind to him, which is why I haven't torn your throat out for keeping him from us." Despite the threat, there was a note in his voice that gave Catherine pause. Concern, genuine worry for Elias. She glanced at the cub, who had moved forward, limping slightly toward the man. "He was hurt by men with silver weapons," she said. "I found him half dead in the snow." Something dangerous flashed across the man's face. "The silver blades," he growled. "They took him 2 weeks ago. We've been hunting for him since." Elias had reached the man now and was pressing against his leg. The intruder knelt, examining the cub with gentle hands that contradicted his fearsome appearance. The tenderness of the gesture was so unexpected that Catherine found herself lowering her rifle slightly. "Your bandaging is skilled," the man said, not looking up. "Military training?" "Combat medic," Catherine answered, surprised. "2 tours in Afghanistan." Now he did look at her, those golden eyes assessing. "That explains why you didn't run screaming when he started to shift." He stood again, imposing even in his more relaxed stance. "I am Magnus Blackwood, Alpha of the Silver Crest Pack. And you are?" "Catherine Morgan," she replied, rifle still ready but no longer aimed directly at him. "And I think you owe me an explanation." Magnus studied her for a long moment, as if weighing a decision. "Yes," he finally said. I suppose I do, but first, may I suggest you put on some coffee? It's a long story and the night is cold. Somehow, Catherine found herself making coffee for a creature out of legend, while Elias curled contentedly at his alpha's feet. The domestic absurdity of it struck her as she set two steaming mugs on the small table. Her life had been thoroughly normal once. She had been a wife, a soldier, a healer. Now she was sharing midnight coffee with a werewolf. He's not my son, Magnus said as she sat across from him, anticipating her question. But he is Pack. His mother is one of our best warriors. She's been half mad with grief since he was taken. The men in the forest, the silver blades, who are they? Magnus's expression darkened. Hunters, scientists, butchers. They've tracked our kind for generations. But in recent years, they've changed tactics. They don't just want to kill us anymore. They want to study us, to take what makes us what we are. And what exactly are you, Tao? Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer. We have many names in human lore. Lycanthropes, skinwalkers, werewolves. Magnus shrugged. We are what we are, human and wolf both, bound together since ancient times when the first shifters made blood pacts with the spirits of the wilderness. He took a sip of coffee, grimacing slightly at the bitterness. There are fewer of us now. Most packs have been hunted to extinction or forced to integrate with human society, hiding what they are. Silvercrest is one of the last true packs, living as we always have, in harmony with both sides of our nature. And the Silverblades want to what? Weaponize you? Magnus nodded. Our strength, our healing abilities, our senses. They want to understand how it works, how to control it. They take our young because children sometimes shift spontaneously, making them easier to study. His hand clenched around the mug. Elias escaped, but not before they hurt him. The wound on his leg was deliberate, silver to prevent healing, to track how we recover from such injuries. Catherine thought of the small boy's pain, of his words about the change hurting, and anger flared hot and unexpected in her chest. That's barbaric. Yes, Magnus agreed, studying her reaction with interest. Most humans fear us on instinct. You're angry on his behalf, Weiswei, because I've seen enough children caught in adult wars, Catherine said simply. In Afghanistan, I treated kids younger than Elias who'd been used as living bombs. Evil doesn't shock me anymore. It just pisses me off. A ghost of a smile touched Magnus's lips. Well said. He set down his mug and leaned forward. But now we have a problem, Catherine Morgan. You know what we are. You've seen Elias shift. Those are secrets my kind has kept for centuries, for our own protection. The implied threat hung in the air between them. Catherine met his gaze steadily. So what happens now? You kill me to keep your secret? That would be simplest, Magnus admitted, and there was no cruelty in his voice, only pragmatism. But there are alternatives. We have ways to remove specific memories. You would forget Elias, forget me, forget everything you've learned about our kind. Catherine thought of the brief glimpses she'd had of Elias in human form, of the trust in his golden eyes. The thought of losing those memories felt like another kind of death. And if I refuse both options, she asked. Magnus raised an eyebrow. You're not in a position to negotiate. Actually, I think I am, Catherine countered, setting down her mug with deliberate calm. You said the silver blades hurt Elias, that they're using silver to interfere with your natural healing. I treated him. I have medical training and knowledge of herbalism from my grandmother. I can help your people. Magnus's eyes narrowed. In exchange for what? I keep my memories. I keep my freedom. Catherine held his gaze. And in return, I offer my skills. No one needs to or have their mind wiped. For a long moment, Magnus was silent, those predator eyes evaluating her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A short, harsh sound, but genuine. You have courage, Catherine Morgan. Or perhaps just a unique form of madness. He shook his head. But you forget that you've seen our greatest vulnerability, our children in their transitional state. The risk is too great. I was a combat medic, Catherine said. I know how to keep secrets. I've carried classified information that could have started wars. Your secret is safe with me. Words, Magnus dismissed. Any human would say the same to save their life. Catherine leaned forward, her patience thinning. Look, I've spent 5 months in this godforsaken wilderness because I couldn't bear to be around other people after my husband died. I have no one to tell your secrets to, even if I wanted to. And frankly, I don't think you're in a position to refuse help either. Those silver blades aren't going to stop hunting your people. You need every advantage you can get. Something in her words seemed to reach him. Magnus studied her with renewed interest. You lost your mate, he said, more statement than question. Recently? 2 years ago, Catherine corrected. Car accident. He was a civilian contractor just back from overseas. Survived a war zone only to die on an American highway. Magnus nodded slowly, something like understanding in his expression. Loss changes us, reshapes us. He glanced down at Elias, who had fallen asleep at his feet. I need to return him to his mother. She has suffered enough. And my offer? Catherine pressed. Magnus was silent for a long moment, his decision hanging in the balance. Finally, he spoke. There is another option. Come with us. The proposal caught Catherine off guard. To your pack? To Silver Crest territory. See for yourself who and what we are. Offer your skills there, where they're needed most. His golden eyes held hers. If you truly wish to help, prove it by coming to our home. And if you decide we are monsters after all, then we can discuss memory alteration. Catherine hesitated. Leave her cabin? The solitude that had been both her punishment and refuge these past months? For what? A pack of werewolves straight out of myth? But then she looked at Elias, peaceful in sleep now that his alpha was near. She thought of the men hunting in her forest, their silver darts and cruel purpose, and she recognized the hollowness inside her that 5 months of isolation had failed to fill. When do we leave? She asked. Magnus's smile revealed teeth too sharp to be fully human. Now, the silver blades are closing in. I covered my tracks coming here, but they're persistent hunters. I'll need to pack some things, Catherine said, rising. Medical supplies, clothes. Take only what you can carry easily, Magnus advised. It's a hard journey, especially for a human. Catherine moved quickly, gathering essentials into her military rucksack. Medical kit, clothing, a few personal items she couldn't bear to leave. Her husband's watch, a photograph, the knife from her grandmother. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars hard as diamonds overhead. Magnus stood waiting, Elias now awake and alert at his side. The Alpha had removed his heavy coat, and in the moonlight, Catherine could see the impossible power coiled in his frame. Not entirely human, not in the way his muscles moved beneath his skin. Ready? He asked as she approached. Catherine took one last look at her cabin. For 5 months, it had been her sanctuary, the place she'd come to nurse her wounds or die from them. She wasn't sure which she'd been hoping for when she first arrived. But now, standing on the threshold of an impossible new chapter, she felt something she'd thought long dead. Curiosity, purpose. I'm ready, she said, and stepped away from her old life and into the unknown. Magnus led the way into the forest, moving with silent grace despite his size. Elias loped beside him, stronger now, though still favoring his injured leg. Catherine followed, grateful for her military training as they set a grueling pace through the snow-covered terrain. They traveled through the night, stopping only briefly for Catherine to rest. Magnus seemed to have endless endurance, and even Elias showed remarkable stamina for one so young and recently injured. Catherine pushed herself to keep up, her breath clouding in the frigid air, her muscles burning with exertion. As dawn approached, they crested a ridge, and Magnus paused, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. We're being followed, he said grimly. Catherine looked back the way they had come. Silverblades? Yes, at least 4 of them. Magnus's eyes gleamed in the pre-dawn light. They must have been closer than I realized. What do we do? Magnus considered their options. We're still half a day's journey from pack territory. We need to move faster. He looked at Catherine, assessing. You can't maintain this pace much longer. Not as a human. Before she could ask what he meant, Magnus knelt beside Elias, speaking in low tones. The cub looked up at Catherine, then back at his alpha, and nodded. Elias will guide you from here, Magnus said, rising and removing his shirt despite the cold. I'll draw the silver blades away. lead them on a false trail. You're going to shift, Catherine realized, understanding dawning, into wolf form. Magnus smiled grimly. Full shift, yes. Only alphas can do it at will, outside the moon's influence. His body was already changing, muscles rippling beneath his skin in ways that defied human anatomy. Follow Elias. Trust him. I'll find you. Catherine wanted to protest, to argue that they should stay together, but the rational part of her brain recognized that Magnus knew these forests and these enemies better than she did. And the medic in her saw that the change was already upon him, his body contorting, bones cracking as they rearranged themselves. She turned away, giving him privacy for what seemed an intensely personal and painful process. Elias pressed against her leg, a silent reassurance. When she looked back, a massive silver wolf stood where Magnus had been, larger than any natural wolf, with the same burning golden eyes. The creature regarded her for a moment, something of the man still evident in its gaze, then turned and bounded away into the forest, a phantom of moonlight and shadow. Be safe, Catherine whispered after him, then looked down at Elias. Well, little one, I guess you're in charge now. The cub yipped softly and set off in a different direction from Magnus, pausing to make sure Catherine followed. She adjusted her pack and fell in behind him, trusting this impossible child wolf to guide her to safety. They traveled through the morning, Elias setting a pace Catherine could maintain, stopping periodically for her to rest and drink from her canteen. The terrain grew more rugged, the forest denser. Several times Elias led her through passages she would never have found on her own. Narrow defiles between boulders, hidden trails beneath fallen trees. By midday, they reached a series of steep ridges. Catherine was exhausted, her legs trembling with fatigue. But Elias urged her on, somehow communicating the urgency of their journey with small sounds and meaningful looks from his golden eyes. As they climbed the final ridge, Catherine felt something strange, a subtle change in the air, a tingling across her skin like static electricity. Elias paused at the crest, waiting for her to join him. When Catherine reached the top, she gasped. Before them lay a hidden valley, sheltered by mountains on all sides. A pristine lake reflected the winter sun at its center, surrounded by forests and meadows. Smoke rose from what appeared to be a village nestled against the far slopes, structures that blended so perfectly with the landscape that they were almost invisible until you knew to look for them. Is that? She began, but Elias was already moving down the slope, his pace quickening now that safety was in sight. As they descended into the valley, Catherine felt that strange tingling sensation intensify. Something brushed against her mind, not words exactly, but a feeling of being examined, evaluated. She stopped, disoriented. Elias turned, whining softly, encouraging her to continue. What is that? She asked, pressing a hand to her temple. That feeling. And the cub couldn't answer, of course, but his insistent nudging got her moving again. As they neared the bottom of the valley, Catherine saw movement at the forest's edge, figures emerging from the trees, people but moving with the same predatory grace she'd seen in Magnus. They were met by three individuals, two men and a woman, all with the same distinctive golden eyes. They approached cautiously, studying Catherine with open suspicion. She's with me, came a familiar voice from behind. Catherine turned to find Magnus striding toward them, fully human again, and dressed in clothes that must have been stashed somewhere along his route. His silver-streaked hair was wild, his expression grim but triumphant. The Silver Blades, Catherine asked, led them 10 miles north to the old mining valleys. They'll be searching there for days. Magnus turned to the waiting group. Where is Selena? The woman stepped forward, her eyes fixed not on Magnus but on Elias. Is it really him? Is it my son? Her voice trembled with barely contained emotion. In answer, Elias bounded toward her, his small body quivering with excitement. The woman fell to her knees, gathering the cub in her arms, her composure breaking as she buried her face in his fur. He's hurt, Magnus said gently. Silver wound. But this human, he nodded toward Catherine, treated him, kept him safe until I found them. All eyes turned to Catherine. The weight of their collective gaze made her skin prickle. You brought a human here? One of the men said, his tone making the word human sound like disease. To our sanctuary? She saved Elias, Magnus replied, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of authority. And she has skills we need, medical training. She knows about us, the other man said, his hand moving to a knife at his belt. She's a liability. Catherine tensed, ready to defend herself if necessary, but Magnus stepped between her and the threatening man. She is under my protection, Magnus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Any harm to her answers to me. Is that clear, Roland? The man, Roland, backed down immediately, though his eyes remained hostile. Yes, Alpha. Magnus turned to Catherine. Welcome to Silvercrest, Catherine Morgan, our home for centuries, hidden from human eyes. He gestured to the woman still clutching Elias. This is Selena, Elias's mother and one of our warriors. And these are Roland and Darius, my lieutenants. Selena looked up, tear tracks on her fierce face. You helped my son, she said, her golden eyes searching Catherine's. Why would a human help one of us? Because he needed help, Catherine answered simply. I'm a medic. That's what I do. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding beyond words. Selena nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not yet acceptance. Come, Magnus said. There's much to explain, and the council will want to meet you. As they walked toward the settlement, Catherine felt the weight of many eyes upon her, from the trees, from the shadows between buildings. An entire community watching the stranger in their midst with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Magnus leaned close, his voice pitched for her ears alone. They're afraid, he explained. Humans have hunted us for generations. Trust will not come easily. I understand, Catherine replied. And she did. She'd seen enough of the world's brutality to understand why a community might turn inward for protection, might view outsiders as threats rather than potential allies. The settlement was unlike any village Catherine had seen. The structures were a seamless blend of natural materials and expert craftsmanship, some built into the hillside itself, others nestled among ancient trees. It reminded her of documentaries she'd seen about indigenous peoples who lived in harmony with their environment rather than imposing upon it. They approached the largest structure, a circular building at the center of the settlement. Inside, a fire burned in a central pit, and around it sat 7 individuals of varying ages. The elders, Catherine guessed, noting the deference with which Magnus addressed them. Alpha, acknowledged an elderly woman, her silver hair cascading over shoulders still powerful despite her years. You returned successful. The boy lives. Her golden gaze shifted to Catherine. And you bring a human into our sanctuary. Explain yourself. Honored mother, Magnus replied. This is Catherine Morgan. She found Elias when he escaped the Silver Blades. She tended his wounds and protected him until I could track them. Without her, he might have died from the silver poisoning. Murmurs ran through the assembled elders. The old woman raised a hand, silencing them. Is this true? She asked Catherine directly. You helped one of our children knowing what he was? I didn't know at first, Catherine admitted. But yes, when I discovered the truth, I still helped him. I'm a healer. It's what I do. A healer, repeated one of the male elders, leaning forward with interest. What kind? Combat medic, Catherine replied. United States Army, 2 tours in Afghanistan. Before that, emergency medicine. And I have some knowledge of traditional herbalism from my grandmother. She offers her skills to us, Magnus added, in exchange for keeping her memories intact. This caused an immediate uproar among the elders. Words like dangerous and precedent were thrown around, voices rising in argument. Again, the elder woman raised her hand for silence. You understand our dilemma, she said to Catherine. For centuries we have survived by remaining hidden. The few humans who discover our existence either join us through mating bonds or... She left the alternative unspoken. I understand, Catherine said, but I've proven I can keep secrets. And I have no one to tell, even if I wanted to. My life before coming to these mountains is over. The old woman studied her thoughtfully. There is truth in your words, but also pain. You run from something, human healer. Not anymore, Catherine replied, meeting the elder's gaze steadily. I'm tired of running. A smile touched the old woman's lips. I am Helena, first elder of Silvercrest. We will consider your offer, Catherine Morgan. Until then, you will be our guest. Magnus will see to your needs. It was a dismissal, but not an unkind one. As they left the council chamber, Catherine felt the enormity of the day's events catching up to her. Exhaustion dragged at her limbs, and the stress of everything she'd witnessed threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. Magnus seemed to sense her fatigue. "Come," he said, leading her toward a smaller dwelling set slightly apart from the others. "You need rest. We can talk more after you've slept." The interior was simple but comfortable. A bed with fur blankets, a small hearth, shelves lined with books and curious artifacts. Magnus lit the fire, bringing warmth to the cool space. "These are my quarters," he explained, seeing her questioning look. "You'll stay here for now. It's safer this way, under my direct protection." "And where will you stay?" Catherine asked, suddenly aware of the implications. Magnus smiled slightly. "I rarely sleep, and when I do, I need little comfort." He moved toward the door. "Rest now. Your life has changed irrevocably today. Give yourself time to process it." After he left, Catherine sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind reeling. 24 hours ago, she had been alone in her cabin, isolating herself from a world that held too many painful memories. Now she was in a hidden valley among creatures out of legend, having pledged her medical skills to a pack of werewolves. It should have terrified her. Instead, as exhaustion pulled her towards sleep, Catherine realized she felt something unexpected. Purpose. For the first time since Michael's death, she had a reason to use her skills again, to care about something beyond mere survival. As sleep claimed her, her last coherent thought was of Magnus's golden eyes and the weight of responsibility she'd seen in them. The burden of protecting an entire people who walked the knife edge between two worlds. And somehow, against all reason, she now shared that burden. The mountains never forget a debt. Neither do wolves. And Catherine Morgan, healer of wounds both seen and unseen, had just bound herself to both. Catherine woke to unfamiliar sounds, soft voices, the distant laughter of children, the rhythmic clang of metal on metal. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't place herself. The bed beneath her was softer than her cabin cot, the air warmer and perfumed with unfamiliar herbs. Then memory rushed back like a wave. The wolf cub, Magnus, the hidden valley of Silver Crest. Werewolves. She was among werewolves. Sunlight streamed through a small window, illuminating Magnus's quarters. In daylight, she could appreciate details missed in her exhaustion. Intricate carvings on the wooden furniture, shelves lined with ancient-looking books and curious artifacts that hinted at a rich cultural history. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her observations. Catherine rose, suddenly conscious of her rumpled appearance after the long journey. "Come in," she called, running a hand through her tangled hair. The door opened to reveal a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, carrying a bundle of clothing and a steaming wooden bowl. She had the distinctive golden eyes of all the Silvercrest werewolves, but hers were flecked with emerald, striking against her copper skin. She regarded Catherine with undisguised curiosity. "I'm Lydia," she said, stepping inside and setting down her burdens. "Magnus's sister. He asked me to bring you fresh clothes and food." Her gaze traveled over Catherine, assessing. "You're smaller than I expected. The way the pack was talking, I thought you'd be some kind of warrior goddess." Catherine couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her. "Sorry to disappoint." "Oh, I'm not disappointed," Lydia said with a grin that transformed her serious face. "Just curious. We don't get many humans here, especially ones who stand up to my brother. Most people just wet themselves and beg for mercy." "Does he inspire that reaction often?" "Only when he wants to." Lydia gestured to the bowl. "You should eat. It's venison stew with forest mushrooms. I'm the healer for the pack, so I know what strengthens humans. You'll need it." Catherine's stomach rumbled in response. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the rich aroma reached her. She took the bowl gratefully and tasted a spoonful. The flavor was complex and earthy, the meat tender. "This is delicious," she said between bites. "Thank you." Lydia beamed. "My own recipe. Magnus said you're a healer too, a combat medic for human warriors." Catherine nodded. "I treated injured soldiers in war zones. Before that, I worked in emergency medicine, treating sudden injuries and illnesses." "We have much to discuss then," Lydia said, eyes brightening with professional interest. "After the morning council, Magnus asked that you join once you are ready." She indicated the clothing bundle. These should fit well enough. The boots might be a bit large, but better than your worn ones for walking around the settlement. After Lydia left, Catherine changed into the provided clothing: soft leather pants, a linen tunic, and a warm fur-lined vest. They fit surprisingly well, though as predicted, the boots were slightly loose. She washed her face in the basin of water that had been left for her, combed her fingers through her hair, and rebraided it. When she emerged from the dwelling, Catherine found Magnus waiting, his powerful frame leaning against a nearby tree. He straightened as she approached, those golden eyes taking in her appearance with approval. "You look rested," he observed, "and Lydia's clothes suit you." "I feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life," Catherine admitted. "Aren't we all, in some way?" Magnus replied with unexpected philosophy. "Come, the settlement awaits, and we have much to discuss before the council reconvenes." The daylight revealed Silver Crest in all its hidden majesty. The settlement sprawled across the protected valley floor, structures built harmoniously into the landscape. Some dwellings nestled into hillsides, others stood among ancient trees whose branches formed natural roofs. People moved purposefully about, training in combat rings, tending gardens, working leather and metal, teaching children. All paused to watch as Magnus led Catherine through their midst. Some expressions showed curiosity, others wariness or outright hostility. "Your people aren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat," Catherine observed quietly. "Can you blame them? Humans have hunted us for centuries. The only ones who normally see our sanctuary are mates or—" He trailed off. "Prisoners," Catherine finished for him. "Yes." Magnus nodded to a group of young warriors who respectfully stepped aside. "But you are neither, which makes you an anomaly." Silvercrest doesn't quite know what to do with anomalies. They approached a training ground where several werewolves sparred with both traditional weapons and what appeared to be specialized firearms. Catherine recognized military-grade equipment that seemed at odds with the otherwise traditional setting. "Surprised?" Magnus asked, noting her expression. "I wouldn't have expected modern weapons." "We adapt to survive. Our enemies evolve their tactics, so must we." He led her past the training grounds toward a series of terraced gardens where people worked among plants Catherine both recognized and found utterly foreign. "This is where you'll likely spend much of your time. Our healing center." The gardens fed into a large structure built into the hillside, its entrance framed by ancient timber posts carved with runes. Inside, the air was cool and perfumed with herbs. Several rooms branched off a central chamber, some containing sick or injured pack members on beds, others filled with equipment for preparing medicines. Lydia was there, grinding something in a mortar. "Our infirmary," Magnus explained. "Lydia oversees it, along with our other healer, Samuel." "It's impressive," Catherine said honestly, examining the setup. It blended traditional healing practices with surprisingly modern medical equipment. "Where do you get the modern supplies?" "We have allies in the human world, pack members who live among your kind, maintaining connections while protecting our secrets." Magnus's expression darkened slightly. "Though these days, such connections are more dangerous than ever. The Silver Blades have infiltrated many institutions." A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Selena appeared, supporting a young man whose leg was wrapped in a bloodied bandage. The sharp, metallic scent of silver reached Catherine's nose even before Lydia cried out in alarm. "Another ambush," Selena reported grimly. "Northern Patrol." Tomas took a silver bullet to the thigh. The injured werewolf was sweating profusely, his golden eyes glazed with pain. Silver poisoning, Catherine realized. Similar to what Elias had suffered, but more severe. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Let me see." Selena's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing at Catherine. "Haven't humans done enough?" "Selena," Magnus's voice carried gentle warning. "Catherine is a healer. Let her help." After a tense moment, Selena relented, helping Tomas onto an examination table. Catherine approached, falling into the familiar role of medic, her hands already reaching to assess the damage. "The bullet?" she asked. "Still there," Selena replied tersely. "We couldn't remove it in the field." Catherine examined the wound. The silver was preventing the werewolf's enhanced healing, allowing infection to set in. The area around the entry wound had turned an unnatural grayish black. "I need tweezers, antiseptic, whatever you have, clean bandages, and hot water," she ordered, automatically taking charge as she had countless times in field hospitals. Lydia scrambled to gather the supplies while Magnus and Selena exchanged looks. Catherine was already cutting away the makeshift bandage, revealing the full extent of the damage. "The silver is poisoning his blood," she explained. "It needs to come out now, and I'll need something for the pain." "Our kind has high tolerance," Magnus said. "Not to silver, you don't," Catherine countered. "I saw how it affected Elias. This is worse." Lydia returned with the requested items plus a small vial. Wolfsbane extract. Properly prepared, it acts as an anesthetic for our kind. Catherine raised an eyebrow at the use of what folklore considered poisonous to werewolves, but now wasn't the time for questions. She administered the extract, waiting for Tomas's rigid muscles to relax before proceeding. With practiced efficiency, she cleaned the area around the wound, then carefully explored the bullet track with sterilized tweezers. Tomas groaned, his body tensing despite the anesthetic. "Hold him," Catherine ordered. Magnus and another warrior immediately moved to secure the injured werewolf. The bullet was deep, lodged against bone. Catherine worked methodically, aware of the watching eyes, knowing her performance was being judged. Finally, the tweezers connected with metal, and she carefully extracted a small, silver-coated bullet. "Got it," she said, dropping the deadly projectile into a basin Lydia held ready. "Now we need to flush the wound with moonflower tea," Lydia supplied. "It neutralizes silver poisoning if administered quickly enough." The young healer already had a pot steeping. Catherine stepped back slightly, allowing Lydia to apply her specialized knowledge while she monitored Tomas's vital signs. "His pulse is steadying," Catherine observed as the moonflower tea was flushed through the wound. The unnatural discoloration began to recede almost immediately, and before her eyes the tissue began to knit together at an accelerated rate. "He'll live," Lydia confirmed, her tone warming slightly toward Catherine. "Thanks to your quick action with the bullet." When they had finished treating Tomas, Catherine turned to find most of the room staring at her with expressions ranging from suspicion to reluctant respect. Selena stepped forward, her fierce face unreadable. "You helped my son. Now you've helped Tomas. Why?" "I told you before," Catherine replied evenly. "I'm a medic. Helping the injured is what I do." "Even those who aren't human?" Selena pressed. "Human, werewolf. A patient is a patient. Pain is pain. My job is to reduce suffering when I can." Selena studied her for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. It wasn't friendship, but it was acknowledgement. Coming from the warrior, Catherine suspected that was significant. After the excitement of Tomas's treatment, Magnus continued the tour, showing Catherine more of the settlement. The Silver Crest Pack numbered nearly 200, he explained, living in harmony with the land while maintaining careful awareness of the outside world. "We're one of the last traditional packs," he said as they walked a path along the edge of the pristine lake. "Most others have integrated into human society, hiding what they are, denying half their nature." "That must be difficult," Catherine said, "living a double life. It destroys many of our kind, the constant deception, the suppression of instinct." Magnus paused, looking out over the water. "Here we live as we were meant to, embracing both human thought and wolf instinct. But our sanctuary grows more precarious each year." "Because of the silver blades?" "They're the most immediate threat, yes. But the encroachment of human expansion is the greater danger. Your kind spreads across every corner of the world, leaving fewer places for creatures like us to remain hidden." When there was no accusation in his tone, just resignation. Catherine found herself wanting to apologize for the actions of her species, though she'd played no direct part in them. They reached a promontory overlooking the valley where Magnus paused again. From this vantage point, Catherine could appreciate the natural protection afforded by the surrounding mountains and the careful way the settlement blended into the landscape. "You mentioned a council meeting," she said. "What should I expect?" Magnus turned to face her, his expression grave. "The elders will determine your status here. Some will advocate for memory alteration despite my protection. Others may support your offer of medical assistance." He hesitated. "They will question you thoroughly. Answer honestly. They'll sense deception. And Catherine," his golden eyes held hers, "don't show fear. We respect strength. I faced down Taliban fighters and field commanders who thought women didn't belong on the front lines." Catherine replied with a hint of steel. "I can handle a few werewolf elders. A ghost of a smile touched Magnus's lips. I believe you can. The council chamber was crowded when they arrived. The 7 elders sat in their circular arrangement, but now they were joined by other high-ranking pack members, including Selena, Roland, and several warriors Catherine hadn't met. Lydia was there as well, offering a small, encouraging nod. Helena, the first elder, raised a hand for silence as Magnus and Catherine entered. The Alpha took a position beside Catherine rather than joining the elders, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed. Catherine Morgan, Helena began, her voice carrying impressive authority for her years. You stand before the Council of Silver Crest as neither prisoner nor mate, but as something unprecedented, a human guest who knows our secret. Your Alpha invited me here, Catherine replied, keeping her voice steady. Magnus acts with the pack's interests at heart, Helena acknowledged, but the Council must determine if those interests are best served by your presence or by traditional methods of secrecy. Traditional methods, Catherine repeated. You mean wiping my memory or killing me? A ripple of discomfort ran through the gathered werewolves at her bluntness. Helena, however, nodded approvingly at her directness. We have survived centuries by maintaining absolute secrecy. Exceptions are exceptional. Roland stepped forward, his hostility barely contained. First Elder, this human has no claim on our protection. No mate bond, no blood ties. Her knowledge of us poses an unacceptable risk. Yet she saved one of our cubs, countered Lydia, and today a warrior. Her skills are valuable. Skills we possess ourselves, Roland argued. Not quite, Lydia replied. Her training in human medicine complements our traditional knowledge. She removed a silver bullet that I would have struggled with. Another elder, an elderly man with a scar running down his face, leaned forward. Tell us, human healer, why should we trust you? Catherine met his gaze directly. Because I've already proven trustworthy. I found Elias, realized what he was, and still protected him. I could have turned him over to the Silverblades or abandoned him. I didn't. One good deed proves little, Roland scoffed. Then judge me by my actions, going forward, Catherine challenged. Let me earn your trust by helping your pack. You're facing enemies with advanced weapons and medical knowledge. I can help counter that. Helena raised a hand, silencing further debate. What do you ask in return for this help, Catherine Morgan? To keep my memories, to maintain my freedom, to learn about your people. Catherine hesitated, then added honestly, and perhaps to find purpose again. Purpose, Helena repeated thoughtfully. You lost yours? When my husband died, yes. I left my career, isolated myself, existing, but not living. The admission cost her, but instinct told her transparency was crucial here. Helena nodded slowly. Loss is something our kind understands well. She turned to Magnus. Alpha, you brought this human among us. What say you of her request? Magnus stepped forward. Catherine Morgan has proven her worth already. Her medical skills saved Elias when silver poisoning might have claimed him. Today she demonstrated those skills again with Tomas. The Silverblades used technology and medicine against us. Perhaps it's time we had our own human expert. And you would vouch for her loyalty? Helena pressed. I would, Magnus replied without hesitation. She will not betray our secrets. This declaration caused murmurs among the council. Roland looked particularly displeased, but even he seemed unwilling to directly challenge the Alpha's judgment. After conferring quietly with the other elders, Helena addressed Catherine again. We will permit you to remain among us, human healer, with your memories intact. In exchange, you will use your skills to treat our wounded and share your knowledge with our healers. Her golden eyes sharpened. But know this, should you ever betray our trust, the consequences will be irreversible. The threat was clear, but Catherine had expected no less. Understood. Then it is decided, Helena announced. Catherine Morgan will remain as healer and advisor on human medicine. She will work primarily with Lydia, but answer directly to the Alpha. The first elder fixed Catherine with a penetrating look. Welcome to Silver Crest, Catherine Morgan. May your presence bring healing rather than harm. As the council dispersed, Catherine felt the weight of what had just transpired. She was now officially part of this hidden world, walking a precarious line between two species. Magnus appeared at her side, his expression inscrutable. "You did well," he said simply. "Your endorsement helped," Catherine replied. "Thank you for that. I spoke truth as I see it, nothing more." He gestured toward the exit. "Come, Lydia will show you to your permanent quarters and begin your introduction to our healing practices." Outside the council chamber, Lydia waited, her expression far warmer than when they'd first met. "I've prepared space for you near the infirmary. It's small, but it has privacy." Catherine followed the young healer through the settlement. Now that her status was officially established, she noticed some of the open hostility had receded, though curious stares remained. A few children darted around them, golden eyes wide with wonder at the human in their midst. Lydia led her to a small but well-crafted dwelling nestled among tall pines near the healing center. Inside was simple but comfortable. A bed, a table with chairs, shelves for personal items, and a small hearth. Fresh flowers stood in a clay vase, adding a welcoming touch. "This is lovely," Catherine said, genuinely appreciative after months in her Spartan cabin. "Thank you. Magnus insisted you have proper accommodations," Lydia explained. "He said you'd given up enough comfort already." She hesitated, then added, "He doesn't extend such consideration to many." Before Catherine could process the implications of this statement, a small figure appeared in the doorway. Elias in human form, looking considerably healthier than when she'd briefly seen him transform in her cabin. The boy hovered uncertainly until Lydia noticed him. "Elias, should you be shifting so soon after your injury?" The boy shrugged. "Mother says I need to practice control, and—" He looked at Catherine shyly. "I wanted to say thank you. Properly." Catherine knelt to his level, struck by how vulnerable he seemed in human form compared to his wolf aspect. "You're very welcome, Elias. How's your leg?" "Almost healed." He stepped forward, golden eyes serious. "Mother says you helped Thomas too, that you know how to fight the silver sickness." "I'm learning," Catherine replied honestly. "Your healers know much more than I do about that." Elias shook his head. "Lydia tried to help me, but the silver kept hurting. Your medicine was different. It helped when ours couldn't." Lydia's expression confirmed this assessment. "Silver poisoning has always been our greatest vulnerability. Our natural healing can't overcome it without assistance. That's why the silver blades use it," Catherine surmised. "They've weaponized your weakness." "Precisely," Lydia agreed, "and they're becoming more sophisticated. The bullet you removed from Thomas was new, designed to fragment inside the body, making removal nearly impossible." Catherine recalled the unusual design of the projectile. "I've seen similar ammunition used against human targets in combat zones. Devastating and illegal under international law." "The silver blades operate outside human law," Lydia said bitterly. "They're funded by powerful interests who see our kind as either a threat to eliminate or a resource to exploit." Elias's small face darkened. "They hurt us, put needles in me, took my blood, made me shift when I wasn't ready." Catherine felt a surge of protective anger. "What happened at their facility, Elias? Anything you can remember might help us understand what they're planning." The boy's eyes took on a haunted quality that no child should possess. "There were others, not just from our pack. They kept us in cages with silver bars. The ones who couldn't control their shifts suffered most." He swallowed hard. "They were testing something, a new kind of silver that burned inside, not just outside. They put it in our food." Lydia gasped softly. "Ingestible silver compounds? That would be catastrophic for our kind." Catherine's mind raced with implications. "They're systematically developing new ways to target your physiology. This goes beyond traditional hunting. It's structured research and development. Which is why your medical knowledge is so valuable," Lydia said. "You understand how these weapons might affect us from a human scientific perspective." After Elias left, Lydia began Catherine's education in earnest. The werewolf healing traditions were a fascinating blend of herbal knowledge, energy manipulation, and practical medical techniques passed down through generations. While some practices seem rooted in superstition, others demonstrated sophisticated understanding of anatomy and pharmaceutical properties of plants. "This is remarkable," Catherine said, examining a tincture that accelerated clotting in werewolf blood. "Some of these compounds could revolutionize human medicine." Which is exactly why we guard them so carefully, Lydia replied. Humans have a habit of weaponizing healing discoveries. Catherine couldn't argue with that assessment. She'd seen firsthand how medical breakthroughs often found their way into military applications. Their work was interrupted by a commotion outside. Catherine followed Lydia to find several warriors returning from patrol, led by Magnus. They carried equipment salvaged from what appeared to be a Silver Blade observation post. Founded on the North Ridge, Magnus explained to the gathering crowd. Recently abandoned, they're mapping the terrain, looking for ways through our defenses. Among the equipment was a sophisticated surveillance system with thermal imaging capabilities. Catherine examined it with growing concern. This is military grade, she said, not something civilians could easily obtain. Magnus nodded grimly. The Silver Blades have powerful backers. Their resources grow each year. Roland pushed through the crowd, his hostile gaze finding Catherine immediately. Interesting that they've advanced so close to our territory since the human arrived. The accusation hung in the air. Catherine met his gaze steadily. If you're implying I led them here, that's impossible. I was under Alpha Blackwood's watch the entire journey. Perhaps a tracking device, Roland suggested. Humans are notorious for their treachery. Enough, Roland, Magnus's voice carried deadly authority. Catherine has been examined thoroughly for such devices. Your accusations waste our time when we should be focusing on the actual threat. Though Roland backed down, Catherine could see his suspicion remained. And he wasn't alone. Several pack members regarded her with renewed wariness. Later, as she helped Lydia organize medical supplies, Catherine broached the subject. Roland really doesn't trust me. Lydia sighed. It's not just you. Roland lost his mate to Silver Blade hunters 5 years ago. She was pregnant with their first cub. His hatred of humans runs bone deep. The revelation put Roland's hostility in painful context. I'm sorry, there aren't words. No, there aren't, Lydia agreed softly. Many in our pack have similar stories. The Silver Blades have hunted us for generations, but in recent years they've become more organized, more methodical. Why? Catherine asked. What changed? Technology changed, information became harder to contain, and Lydia hesitated. There are rumors that they've found backing from a powerful corporation interested in our regenerative abilities. Biopharmaceutical research, Catherine surmised. Your healing factor would be worth billions if it could be synthesized. Exactly. Why merely eliminate a threat when you can profit from it first? The conversation left Catherine troubled. That night, alone in her new quarters, she found sleep elusive. The scale of the threat facing Silvercrest was greater than she'd initially understood. This wasn't just age-old superstition driving hunters to eliminate supernatural creatures. It was modern corporate greed and scientific avarice, a far more dangerous combination. A soft knock at her door roused her from these dark thoughts. She opened it to find Magnus standing in the moonlight, his powerful frame silhouetted against the night sky. You're troubled, he said, not a question, but an observation. I can sense your unrest from across the settlement. You can sense my emotions? Catherine asked, momentarily distracted from her concerns. Alphas are attuned to the emotional states of those under their protection. May I come in? Catherine stepped aside, suddenly conscious of her simple sleeping clothes and unbound hair. Magnus entered, his presence making the small space seem even smaller. He declined the offered chair, preferring to stand. The surveillance equipment concerns you, he said directly. It should concern all of us, Catherine replied. That's not amateur hunting gear, it's professional-grade monitoring technology, the kind used for high-value targets. High value, Magnus repeated thoughtfully, an apt description for what we've become to the Silver Blades. No longer merely creatures to be eliminated, but subjects to be studied. Lydia mentioned corporate backing. Pharmaceutical companies? Magnus nodded. Genomics Innovations. They specialize in regenerative medicine and genetic therapies. Our ability to heal, to shift our forms, these would be priceless technologies if they could be extracted and replicated. And the Silver Blades provide the specimens, Catherine concluded grimly. Precisely. Magnus moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit settlement. We've all lost 8 pack members in the past year alone, not killed but captured. We haven't been able to rescue any of them. The pain in his voice was evident, despite his controlled expression. The burden of leadership was heavy on him, Catherine realized. each loss a personal failure in his eyes. "This isn't just about protecting your secret anymore," she said softly. "It's about surviving exploitation." "Yes, which is why your presence here is both valuable and complicated." He turned to face her. "Your medical knowledge may help us counter their scientific advantages, but having a human among us, it divides opinion, makes some uneasy. Like Roland. Roland is an extreme case, but not unique. Trust will come slowly, if at all." Magnus's golden eyes studied her intently. "Yet you don't seem bothered by this." Catherine smiled faintly. "I've spent most of my career as an outsider. Female combat medic in predominantly male units. The only one without a gun in a firefight. I'm used to having to prove myself." Something like approval flickered in Magnus's expression. "You've faced battles of your own." "Different ones, but yes." Catherine hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why did you really bring me here, Magnus? There must be other human doctors you could have approached. Ones with connections to your kind already." Magnus was silent for a long moment, considering his response. "When I found you with Elias, I saw something rare. A human who didn't react with fear or disgust upon discovering our nature. You responded with compassion, with a healer's instinct. And," he seemed to weigh his next words carefully, "you carry grief like a familiar companion, not a crushing burden. You've made peace with your pain in a way few manage." Catherine wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpectedly perceptive assessment. "My husband's death destroyed the future I had planned. I'm still figuring out what comes next." "Perhaps that's why you fit here," Magnus suggested. "Silvercrest exists in a similar state, preserving our past while facing an uncertain future. We balance between worlds, as you balance between your former life and whatever comes next." The philosophical turn of the conversation surprised Catherine. There was depth to Magnus that his intimidating exterior concealed, an introspective quality she hadn't expected from the fierce alpha. Before she could respond, a howl pierced the night, an alarm call that had Magnus instantly alert. More howls joined the first, creating an urgent chorus. "What is it?" Catherine asked, already reaching for her boots. "Intruders," Magnus replied tersely, moving toward the door. "Stay here, it could be dangerous." "If there are injuries, you'll need me," Catherine countered, pulling on her vest. "I'm coming." Magnus looked like he wanted to argue, but instead gave a curt nod. "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say." Outside, the settlement was in controlled chaos. Warriors moved with purpose toward the northern perimeter, while others herded children and elders toward central safe houses. Lydia appeared, medical bag in hand. "Silver blades?" Catherine asked her. "At least 6 of them," Lydia confirmed. "They've breached the outer warning system." Magnus conferred briefly with his lieutenants, issuing rapid orders. Catherine caught fragments: defensive positions, flanking maneuvers, evacuation protocols. The Alpha was in his element, commanding with instinctive authority. "How did they find us?" Catherine wondered aloud. "The valley is so well hidden." "Someone must have guided them," Lydia replied grimly. "They couldn't have navigated the protective boundaries otherwise." Roland appeared armed and grim-faced. His suspicious glare found Catherine immediately. "Convenient timing," he growled. "The human settles in and suddenly Silverblades penetrate our defenses." "Not now, Roland," Magnus snapped. "Take your team to the eastern ridge. Cut off their retreat if they try to circle back." Though Roland complied, his accusation hung in the air. Catherine felt eyes on her from all directions, suspicion rekindled by the timing of the incursion. "Ignore him," Lydia advised. "Roland sees human treachery everywhere." "Can you blame him?" Catherine replied. "From his perspective, I'm the obvious suspect." Magnus rejoined them, his expression grave. "The Silver Blades have advanced technology, night vision, thermal imaging. They're moving with purpose, heading directly for the council chamber." He looked at Catherine. "Stay with Lydia at the healing center. Be ready for casualties." As Magnus departed with his warriors, Catherine followed Lydia to prepare the infirmary. They worked quickly, setting out supplies for treating potential silver wounds, preparing moonflower tea in quantity. "This feels wrong," Catherine said as they worked. "The timing, the precision of their approach. They shouldn't have been able to find this place so easily." "You think there's a traitor?" Lydia surmised. "Someone within the pack guiding them?" It would explain how they're navigating the defenses so effectively. Lydia looked troubled by this suggestion. Betraying the pack is unthinkable. The bond between us is sacred. Sacred bonds can be broken, Catherine said gently, by grief, by fear, by promises of protection or reward. Before they could pursue this disturbing line of thought, the first casualties arrived, two warriors with silver burns from some kind of aerosol weapon. Catherine and Lydia worked side by side, treating the painful wounds with a combination of human and werewolf healing techniques. More injured came in waves, none critically, but enough to keep them busy. The silver blades were using non-lethal weapons, Catherine realized, designed to incapacitate rather than kill. They wanted captives, not corpses. A sudden commotion outside drew their attention. Selena burst in, supporting Magnus himself. The Alpha was conscious but clearly in pain, a silver-tipped dart protruding from his shoulder. "Get it out," he growled as they helped him to an examination table. Catherine examined the dart with concern. Unlike normal tranquilizers, this one had barbs that would tear flesh if pulled directly out. "I need to cut around it," she told Magnus. "It's designed to cause maximum damage during removal." Magnus nodded grimly. "Do it." With Lydia assisting, Catherine carefully excised the barbed dart, working to minimize tissue damage. The surrounding area was already turning gray with silver poisoning. "What happened out there?" she asked as she worked. "Ambush," Magnus replied through gritted teeth. "They weren't after the council chamber. That was a feint. They were targeting me specifically." "How would they know which warrior was the Alpha?" Catherine wondered aloud. "Because someone told them," Magnus said darkly. As Catherine finished treating his wound, Magnus rose despite their protests. "I need to coordinate the defense. They're still out there." "You need rest," Catherine insisted. "That was a specialized delivery system for silver. Your body needs time to recover." Magnus fixed her with a steely gaze. "My pack needs their Alpha. Rest comes later." After he left, Lydia shook her head in exasperation. "Stubborn as a mountain. He'll drive himself to collapse." "Is that common for alphas?" Catherine asked. "This self-sacrificing tendency?" "Magnus takes the responsibility more heavily than most. After his father was killed by Silverblades, he stepped into leadership earlier than expected. He's been trying to prove himself worthy ever since." The insight added another layer to Catherine's understanding of Magnus. His intimidating exterior concealed deep-seated determination to protect his people at any cost. The rest of the night passed in a blur of treating injuries and preparing medicines. By dawn, the immediate crisis had passed. The Silverblades had retreated after their failed attempt to capture Magnus, leaving behind equipment and their wounded, whom they had evacuated. As Catherine finally took a moment to rest, she noticed Elias hovering near the infirmary entrance. The boy was in human form again, his small face pinched with worry. "Are you hurt?" she asked immediately. He shook his head. "No. Mother kept me safe in the deep dens." He glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard, then approached Catherine with purpose. "I need to tell you something. About the attack." Catherine knelt to his level. "What is it, Elias?" The boy's golden eyes were troubled. "When the Silverblades had me, I heard them talking. About someone inside our pack. Someone helping them." He lowered his voice to a whisper. "They called him the Wolf in Silver's clothing." A chill ran through Catherine. "Did you tell Magnus this?" Elias shook his head. "I was afraid. If someone in the pack is helping them, they might hurt me for telling." His small hand clutched at Catherine's sleeve. "But I trust you. You saved me." "Thank you for trusting me," Catherine said, mind racing with the implications. "Do you know anything else about this person? Anything you overheard?" "Only that they meet at the old mining camp to exchange information." Elias's expression was solemn beyond his years. "The hunters said their silver wolf was high in the pack, someone close to the Alpha." The information was disturbing but vague. A traitor close to Magnus could be any of his lieutenants or council members. Still, it confirmed Catherine's suspicion that the attack had been coordinated from within. "You were very brave to tell me this," she told Elias. "I'll make sure Magnus knows, but I won't say it came from you. I promise." After sending Elias back to his mother, Catherine sought out Magnus. She found him in the council chamber with his lieutenants reviewing the night's events. Roland was there, along with Darius and several other high-ranking warriors. They fell silent as Catherine entered, their expressions varying from neutral to openly hostile. "This is a private meeting," Roland said sharply. "I asked her to join us," Magnus countered, though Catherine had received no such invitation. His quick support silenced Roland's objection. "Catherine brings an outside perspective that may be valuable." Catherine approached the table where maps and recovered silver blade equipment were spread out. "They use specialized weapons," she observed. "Non-lethal but incapacitating. They wanted captives." "Yes," Magnus agreed, "and they targeted leadership specifically. They knew exactly where I would be during the defense." "Which suggests inside information," Catherine said carefully, aware of the tension her words created. "Their movements were too precise for random intruders." Roland's eyes narrowed. "Convenient that you should suggest a traitor among us when you're the most obvious suspect." "Roland," Magnus warned. "No, Alpha, this needs to be said." Roland stepped forward, his hostility no longer contained. "She arrives, and within days, silver blades penetrate our defenses. She examines their weapons with expert knowledge. She pushes herself into our councils and healing traditions. And now she sows distrust among us with talk of traitors." Murmurs of agreement came from some of the assembled warriors. Catherine realized how precarious her position was, a human among werewolves when human hunters had just attacked. The timing did look suspicious from their perspective. "If I were working with the Silver Blades," she said calmly, "why would I help treat their victims? Why save Magnus when he was targeted?" "To gain our trust," Roland replied immediately, "to position yourself deeper within our ranks." Magnus had been watching the exchange with calculated assessment. Now he spoke, his voice level but with underlying steel. "Catherine had multiple opportunities to betray us if that was her intention. She could have signaled the Silver Blades during our journey here. She could have left Elias to die from silver poisoning. She didn't. Perhaps she plays a longer game," Roland persisted. "The Silver Blades are patient hunters." "Enough," Magnus's tone ended further argument. "Catherine remains under my protection. Her medical skills have already saved pack members. That earns her the right to speak in this council." The declaration silenced Roland, though his expression remained mutinous. Catherine sensed she'd gained an implacable enemy, one whose suspicion would not be easily dispelled. The meeting continued, focusing on strengthening defenses and increasing patrols. When it concluded, Magnus asked Catherine to remain behind. Once they were alone, he regarded her with those penetrating, golden eyes. "You suspect someone specific," he said. "I saw it in your face when Roland was speaking." Catherine hesitated. "I have a source who overheard Silver Blades discussing a traitor within the pack. Someone they call the Wolf in Silver's clothing. Someone close to you." Magnus showed no surprise at this revelation, only grim confirmation. "I've suspected for some time. Too many coincidences. Too many close calls where the hunters seem to anticipate our movements." "You know who it is," Catherine realized. "I have suspicions, not proof." Magnus's expression was unreadable. And accusations without proof would fracture the pack at a time when unity is essential. "Roland seems the obvious suspect given his hostility toward humans. But that feels too obvious." Magnus nodded. "Roland makes no secret of his hatred. A true traitor would be more circumspect. Your sister mentioned he lost his mate to Silver Blades. Could that have turned him? Revenge or despair, making him vulnerable to manipulation?" "Possible," Magnus acknowledged, "but there are others with equally compelling motives. Darius lost family too. Even Helena has reasons to resent my leadership. She believed her son should have become Alpha after my father died." The complexity of pack politics was becoming clearer to Catherine. Beneath the surface unity lay currents of ambition, resentment, and old grievances, fertile ground for external manipulation. "What will you do?" she asked. "Set a trap," Magnus replied simply. "Feed different information to different sources. See which reaches the Silver Blades. A dangerous game, but necessary." Magnus moved to the window, looking out over his domain. The traitor represents a greater threat than any external enemy. They violated the most sacred trust of the pack. Catherine could hear the personal betrayal beneath his words. Whoever the traitor was, they had hurt Magnus not just as Alpha, but as the man who considered every pack member under his protection. "I want to help," she said impulsively. "The traitor won't suspect me of being part of your inner circle. I could notice things others might miss." Magnus turned, studying her with new appreciation. "You continue to surprise me, Catherine Morgan. Most humans would run from this danger, not step further into it." "I'm not most humans," she replied simply, "and I've never been good at running away from fights that matter." A rare smile touched Magnus's lips. "No, I don't imagine you are." He moved closer, his powerful presence filling her awareness. "Very well. You'll be my eyes where others might not look. But understand the risk. If the traitor suspects you're hunting them, they won't hesitate to eliminate the threat." "I understand." Catherine met his gaze steadily. "I didn't survive war zones by being careless." Something shifted in Magnus's expression. A softening, a new awareness. For a moment they stood in charged silence, the air between them heavy with unspoken recognition. Then the Alpha stepped back, resuming his customary reserve. "West while you can," he advised. "The Silver Blades will return, better prepared next time, and our traitor will be watching for any change in routine." As Catherine left the council chamber, she felt a new sense of purpose solidifying within her. The 5 months of isolation in her mountain cabin seemed like another lifetime, a period of stasis between her old life and whatever this new chapter would bring. She had come to Silvercrest as a healer, but now found herself drawn into a complex web of loyalty, betrayal, and survival. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to escape the complications of human society, she'd stumbled into an even more precarious position, a human in a werewolf power struggle, aligned with an alpha whose golden eyes saw too much and revealed too little. Yet despite the danger, Catherine felt more alive than she had since Michael's death. Here, her skills mattered. Her presence made a difference. And in Magnus's guarded acknowledgement of her worth, she'd found something she hadn't realized she was seeking: recognition of the strength that had carried her through loss. The mountains never forget a debt. Neither do wolves. And Catherine Morgan was beginning to understand that she owed a debt to both, for pulling her back from the edge of oblivion and giving her a reason to fight again. Dawn broke over Silvercrest with uneasy brilliance, painting the valley in shades of amber and gold that belied the tension permeating the settlement. 3 days had passed since the Silver Blade incursion, and the pack remained on high alert. Patrols doubled, children kept close to the central areas, warriors training with renewed intensity. The atmosphere of peaceful seclusion had been replaced by vigilant wariness. Catherine moved through this charged environment with purpose, dividing her time between the infirmary and strategic meetings with Magnus. Their plan to identify the traitor had begun in subtle ways: different information shared with different council members, careful observation of reactions, tracking who knew what and when. It was methodical work that reminded Catherine of intelligence operations she'd witnessed during her military service. The infirmary had become her domain, a place where she could both serve the pack and observe its dynamics. Injured warriors brought news from the borders, along with their wounds. Lydia shared gossip heard in the gathering circles. Even the children who came for minor scrapes offered insights through innocent observations. Catherine absorbed it all, building a mental map of Silvercrest's complex social web. This morning found her inventorying medicinal herbs with Lydia, their hands working in companionable rhythm as they discussed treatment protocols for silver poisoning. "The combination of moonflower tea and your antibiotic ointment shows remarkable results," Lydia observed, her initial wariness of Catherine's human medicine having evolved into professional respect. "Tomas's leg has healed completely, with minimal scarring." "It's the synergy between approaches," Catherine replied, carefully measuring dried wolfsbane into small packets. "Your traditional remedies address aspects my training doesn't cover, and vice versa." Lydia's golden green eyes studied Catherine with curiosity. "You've adapted to our ways more quickly than anyone expected. Even Roland has stopped suggesting you should be memory wiped at every council meeting." "High praise indeed," Catherine said dryly, though the information about Roland's changing stance was noteworthy. The hostile lieutenant had been at the top of her suspect list for the traitor. If his antagonism was genuinely easing, she might need to reconsider. Their work was interrupted by a commotion outside. Voices raised in alarm, the sound of running feet. Catherine followed Lydia to the entrance, where they found a gathering crowd around a returning patrol. At its center stood Darius, supporting a young female warrior whose skin bore an alarming gray pallor. "What happened?" Lydia demanded, rushing forward. "New weapon," Darius reported grimly. "Aerosol silver compound, more concentrated than before. Arya got the worst of it when she covered our retreat." Catherine moved to help transfer the injured warrior to the infirmary. Arya's breathing was labored, her golden eyes clouded with pain. The exposed skin of her face, neck, and hands showed a network of grayish veins where the silver compound had been absorbed through her pores. "How long since exposure?" Catherine asked, already gathering supplies. 20 minutes, Darius replied. "We ran full speed back to settlement." Inside the infirmary, Catherine and Lydia worked with urgent efficiency. This was worse than any silver poisoning Catherine had treated before. Systemic rather than localized, affecting multiple organ systems simultaneously. "Her body is shutting down," Lydia said, voice tight with worry as she prepared the standard moonflower tea. "The silver is spreading too quickly." Catherine's mind raced through options. The traditional treatment wouldn't be potent enough for this level of contamination. They needed something stronger, something that would bind to the silver compounds and neutralize them throughout the bloodstream. "Chelation therapy," she said suddenly, remembering protocols for heavy metal poisoning in humans. "We need a binding agent that can capture the silver molecules and allow her body to eliminate them." Lydia looked confused. "What do you mean?" "In human medicine, we use compounds that bind to metals in the bloodstream," Catherine explained, already moving to the herb shelves. "Does your pharmacopoeia have anything that specifically binds to silver? Not just treats the symptoms, but it captures the actual particles?" Lydia's eyes widened with realization. "Moonshadow root. It's rare, used only in the most sacred rituals because it draws power from silver rather than being damaged by it. But we've never used it medicinally." "Where is it kept?" "The ceremonial stores. Only Helena has access." Catherine was already heading for the door. "Get an infusion prepared for when I return, and keep her stable." She ran through the settlement toward the elders' quarters, drawing startled looks from pack members unaccustomed to seeing such urgency from the normally composed human healer. Helena's dwelling stood apart, marked by ancient symbols carved into the timber frame. Catherine found the first elder in conversation with two other council members. Without ceremony, she interrupted. "First elder, we need Moonshadow root immediately. A warrior is dying from advanced silver poisoning." Helena's ancient eyes sharpened. "Moonshadow is sacred, used only for—" "With respect," Catherine cut in, "Arya won't survive traditional treatments. The silver has entered her bloodstream in concentrated form. The root's affinity for silver could save her life." The two council members looked affronted by her interruption, but Helena studied Catherine for one long moment before nodding. Without a word, she moved to an ornate chest in the corner of her dwelling, unlocking it with a key worn around her neck. From within, she withdrew a small leather pouch. "This is precious beyond measure," she said, placing it in Catherine's hands. "Use it wisely." Catherine ran back to the infirmary, where Arya's condition had deteriorated further. The gray veins had spread across her torso, and her breathing had become shallow and irregular. Together with Lydia, Catherine prepared the Moonshadow root according to the young healer's knowledge of sacred preparations, modified for medicinal use. The resulting infusion glowed with faint bluish luminescence. "This is untested," Catherine warned as they prepared to administer it. "But it's her only chance." "Do it," Lydia urged. They fed the infusion to Arya drop by drop, monitoring her responses carefully. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to change. Then gradually the gray pallor of her skin began to recede, starting from her core and withdrawing from her extremities like a tide pulling back from shore. "It's working," Lydia breathed in amazement. "The silver is being neutralized." By the time Magnus arrived, having been informed of the incident, Arya was resting comfortably. Her breathing normalized and the gray veins almost entirely faded. The Alpha surveyed the scene with calculating eyes. "Explain." Lydia outlined what had happened, emphasizing Catherine's innovative application of the sacred Moonshadow root. Magnus listened in silence, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "The Silver Blades have escalated their tactics," he noted finally. "This aerosol compound represents a significant threat. They're testing new weapons, Catherine agreed, each more sophisticated than the last. First the fragmented bullets, now this. They're systematically developing ways to incapacitate your warriors. For capture rather than killing, Magnus observed, confirming our suspicions about their motives. Darius, who had remained at Arya's side throughout her treatment, looked up with burning eyes. They were waiting for us, Alpha. The patrol route was supposed to be secret, but they knew exactly where to position themselves for maximum effect. The implication hung in the air. Another leak, another piece of evidence pointing to the traitor in their midst. Magnus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We'll discuss this privately. For now, ensure Arya receives all necessary care. His golden gaze shifted to Catherine. Walk with me. Outside, away from listening ears, Magnus led Catherine toward the lakeshore. The morning sun glittered on the water surface, creating an illusion of tranquility at odds with their grim conversation. Your quick thinking saved Arya's life, he acknowledged. The use of Moonshadow Root was unconventional, but effective. Sometimes the most valuable solutions come from crossing traditional boundaries, Catherine replied, combining approaches that have never been connected before. Like a human healer working with werewolf medicine. Magnus stopped at the water's edge, his powerful profile silhouetted against the sparkling lake. Darius's report troubles me. That patrol route was known only to council members and the warriors assigned to it. Narrowing our suspect pool, Catherine noted. Yes, and suggesting our traitor has access to the highest levels of pack decision-making. Magnus turned to face her, his expression grave. I've set the final piece of our trap. At this morning's council meeting, I shared plans for moving our most vulnerable members to a secondary safe location, a cave system in the eastern mountains. Different coordinates were given to different council members. And if the silver blades appear at one specific location, we'll know which council member is feeding them information. Magnus's eyes hardened. The evacuation is scheduled for tomorrow night. I expect the traitor will act before then. Catherine absorbed this information, understanding the danger implicit in such a plan. You're using the pack's most vulnerable as bait. No, Magnus corrected firmly. The coordinates are false. No one will actually be moved, but the traitor doesn't know that. Relief washed through Catherine. Clever. And what do you need from me? Observation. You move through the settlement with relative freedom. People speak more openly around you, seeing you as an outsider to our politics. Notice who seems anxious, who asks questions about evacuation details, who disappears at unusual times. I can do that. Catherine hesitated, then added, but Magnus, if the traitor suspects they're being watched, they will act with greater desperation, yes. His golden eyes held hers. Which is why you must be careful. Your safety is, he paused, seeming to reconsider his words. Your medical skills are too valuable to lose. The brief hesitation, the subtle shift in phrasing, Catherine filed these away, sensing something significant in what remained unsaid. They parted wisely, Catherine returning to the infirmary while Magnus rejoined his warriors. Throughout the day, she divided her attention between patient care and careful observation, noting which council members visited Arya, what questions they asked, how they reacted to news of the innovative treatment. Roland appeared briefly, his usual hostility muted as he checked on his patrol member. He asked detailed questions about the new silver compound, his concerns seemingly genuine. Darius remained by Arya's side for hours, his devotion to his fallen warrior evident. Helena visited to inquire about the use of her sacred Moonshadow Root, her ancient eyes missing nothing as she surveyed the infirmary. By evening, Catherine had compiled mental notes on each council member's behavior, but found nothing definitively suspicious. The traitor, if among them, was skilled at concealing their true allegiance. As darkness fell, she retired to her quarters, reviewing the day's observations while preparing for sleep. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Opening the door, she found Selena, Elias's mother, and one of Magnus's most trusted warriors. The Alpha requests your presence, Selena said without preamble. Discreetly. Catherine followed Selena through the settlement, noting they avoided the main pathways, keeping to shadows. They approached not the council chamber or Magnus's quarters, but a small structure near the training grounds that Catherine had never entered before. Inside, she found Magnus with Darius and Lydia gathered around a table laden with maps. The Alpha looked up as she entered, nodding acknowledgement. Thank you for coming. We're finalizing evacuation routes for tomorrow night. His tone was normal, but his eyes conveyed a different message. This was for show, in case unwanted ears were listening. Catherine played along, examining the maps with appropriate interest. These northern passages seem narrow for moving groups quickly, which is why we'll use the eastern caves as our primary location, Magnus replied. More space, better defensive positions. The conversation continued in this vein until Selena returned from checking the perimeter and gave a subtle signal to Magnus. Only then did his demeanor shift, voice dropping to a near whisper. We're being watched. Council communications have been compromised more thoroughly than I anticipated. This location is secure. We swept it for listening devices earlier today. Who's watching? Catherine asked quietly. Uncertain, but movement at the settlement boundaries suggests Silverblades are already positioning for tomorrow night. They couldn't have gotten that information so quickly unless they have real-time communication with their source, Darius finished grimly. Catherine absorbed this disturbing escalation. So the traitor isn't just passing information during occasional meetings. They're actively communicating from within Silver Crest. Yes, Magnus confirmed, which means they have technology we haven't detected. Transmitters, Catherine surmised, small enough to conceal, powerful enough to reach outside the valley. Lydia looked troubled. Such devices would have been found during normal security sweeps. Not if they're disguised as something else, Catherine suggested, or hidden where no one would think to look. Or if the person conducting the security sweeps is the traitor, Darius added darkly. Magnus straightened, decision made. We move tonight, not tomorrow. A select team only, those in this room, plus 3 warriors I trust implicitly. We'll position ourselves at all 3 sets of false coordinates and wait for the Silverblades to show themselves. And the traitor, Selena asked, will reveal themselves by their actions when they realize the evacuation timeline has changed. Magnus's eyes glinted with predatory focus. Catherine, you'll remain here with Lydia. Monitor who reacts with surprise or alarm to news of the expedited timeline. Catherine started to object. She wanted to be part of the ambush team, but recognized the strategic value in remaining behind. As the human outsider, she might notice what those closer to the situation missed. I understand, she agreed, but be careful. These new weapons are designed specifically to incapacitate your kind. Something flickered in Magnus's expression, a momentary softening that contrasted with his battlefield demeanor. We'll move with caution. If all goes well, by dawn we'll have both the Silver Blade team and our traitor. The group dispersed with purposeful efficiency, each understanding their role in the night's dangerous gambit. Catherine returned to her quarters by a circuitous route, senses alert for any sign of surveillance. Nothing obvious presented itself, but the feeling of being watched lingered like a shadow at the edge of her awareness. Sleep proved elusive as she waited for the signal that would announce the false evacuation's acceleration. Around midnight, it came, howls echoing through the settlement, the predetermined alert that sent the remaining council members and warriors into controlled action. Catherine dressed quickly and made her way to the infirmary, where she found Lydia already preparing medical supplies for potential casualties. Any reactions of note? Catherine asked as she joined the preparations. Helena seemed genuinely surprised by the change in timeline, Lydia reported. Roland was suspicious, asking too many questions about who made the decision. And I haven't seen Samuel at all, which is unusual for an emergency mobilization. Samuel, the second healer, older and more traditional than Lydia. Catherine had interacted with him only occasionally, finding him politely distant but competent. He'd never struck her as particularly suspicious, but absence during a crisis was noteworthy. Where would he normally be? Here, or gathering additional supplies from his personal stores. He has rare medicines he doesn't keep in the central infirmary. Show me where he lives, Catherine decided. We should make sure he's been notified. Lydia hesitated. Magnus said to monitor reactions, not investigate directly. We're not confronting anyone, just checking on a colleague's whereabouts during an emergency. Completely reasonable. After a moment's consideration, Lydia nodded. You're right, and I am genuinely concerned about him. And Samuel's quarters were located near the eastern edge of the settlement, a modest dwelling partially built into a hillside surrounded by carefully tended herb gardens. No light showed from within. "Should we knock?" Catherine whispered as they approached. Before Lydia could respond, a shadow detached itself from the tree line beyond Samuel's garden, a figure moving with furtive haste away from the settlement. In the moonlight, Catherine caught the distinctive silhouette of the older healer, carrying what appeared to be a small pack. Lydia inhaled sharply. "Where is he going?" "The evacuation gathering point is in the opposite direction." "Let's find out," Catherine replied grimly, but quietly. They followed at a distance, using the forest's natural cover. Samuel moved with surprising speed for his age, following no established path but navigating with evident familiarity. After nearly a mile, he approached a large lightning-struck oak that Catherine recognized as one of the boundary markers Magnus had pointed out during her orientation to Silvercrest territory. Samuel paused at the tree, glanced around furtively, then knelt at its base. From his pack, he withdrew what appeared to be a small metal device. When he activated it, a faint blue light glowed briefly in the darkness. "A transmitter," Catherine breathed, her suspicion confirmed. "He's warning them about the change in plans." Lydia's face showed shock and betrayal. "Samuel is the oldest healer in Silvercrest. He trained me. He delivered half the cubs in the pack, including Elias." Her voice caught. "Why would he betray us?" "I don't know," Catherine admitted, "but we need to alert Magnus immediately." "Too late for that," came a cold voice from behind them. Catherine whirled to find Roland emerging from the shadows, his golden eyes gleaming with dangerous intensity in the moonlight. "Roland, Samuel is—" "I know exactly what Samuel is doing," Roland cut her off, his voice glacial. "The question is, what are you two doing, following him without authorization?" Lydia stepped forward. "Roland, he has a transmitter. He's communicating with the Silver Blades. We have to warn Magnus." Roland's expression didn't change. "Magnus is occupied with his wild goose chase at the false coordinates. By the time he realizes his error, it will be too late." The implication struck Catherine with sickening clarity. "You're working with Samuel." A thin smile spread across Roland's face. "Samuel works for me. His medical knowledge has been invaluable in helping the Silverblades develop their new weapons. The irony of a healer creating such effective weapons is poetic, don't you think?" Lydia's face had drained of color. "You? You're the traitor? After everything the Silverblades have done to our kind? They killed your mate." "They did," Roland acknowledged, his voice hardening. "Because Magnus's father refused to negotiate, refused to see that times were changing. He clung to old ways until it got half our pack killed, including my Serena and our unborn cub." He advanced toward them, forcing Catherine and Lydia to back up toward the lightning-struck oak, where Samuel still knelt with his transmitter. "The old man was a fool, and his son is no better. Magnus thinks he can keep us hidden forever, fighting a losing battle against a world that grows smaller every day. There are no more wild places left, no territories where we can truly remain hidden." "So you betray your own kind to the very people who murdered your family?" Catherine challenged, trying to keep him talking, while her mind raced for a way out of this dangerous situation. "How does that honor Serena's memory?" Roland's expression contorted with rage. "Don't you dare speak her name. You know nothing of honor or pack loyalty, human. I'm saving what remains of Silvercrest the only way possible, by negotiating from a position of strength." "Negotiating?" Lydia echoed in disbelief. "The Silverblades don't negotiate. They capture, experiment, kill." "Their corporate masters do negotiate," Roland corrected. "Genomics needs live specimens, willing participants in their research. In exchange for providing them with controlled access to volunteer pack members, they've guaranteed sanctuary for the rest. Protection from other hunters, legal identity in the human world, medical care that doesn't rely on moonflower tea and primitive rituals." The full scope of Roland's betrayal was breathtaking. Not just passing information, but actively collaborating in a fundamental reshaping of werewolf existence. "And who volunteers for their experiments?" Catherine asked, though she already suspected the answer. Roland's smile returned, colder than before. "Those who oppose the arrangement. Those too traditional to see its necessity. Those like Magnus, who would rather die free than live by adapting to reality." "You're insane," Lydia breathed. "The pack would never accept this. You can't make these decisions unilaterally. They'll accept it when Magnus is gone, and I take his place as alpha, Roland stated with chilling confidence, especially when they see the benefits of Genomix's protection compared to our current precarious existence. During this exchange, Samuel had finished with his transmitter and joined them, his aged face set in resigned determination. It's done, he told Roland. They're moving to intercept the Alpha's team now. Roland nodded in satisfaction. Good. And these two? Samuel glanced at Lydia with something like regret. They know too much. They can't be allowed to warn the others. My thoughts exactly, Roland agreed, drawing a wicked-looking knife from his belt. The human dies first. Her interference has complicated matters from the beginning. Catherine tensed, ready to defend herself, but knew her chances against a werewolf warrior were slim. Lydia moved to stand beside her, her loyalty clear despite her shock and betrayal. You'll have to kill me too, Roland, the young healer declared. I won't let you harm her. So be it, Roland snarled, advancing with predatory intent. Before he could strike, a bone-chilling howl split the night, a sound of pure authority that froze Roland in his tracks. From the surrounding forest emerged multiple pairs of glowing golden eyes, advancing with silent menace. Magnus stepped into the clearing, his powerful form radiating barely controlled fury. Behind him came Darius, Selena, and several other warriors, effectively surrounding Roland and Samuel. Did you think I wouldn't anticipate your betrayal, Roland? Magnus's voice was terrifyingly calm. That I wouldn't see the pattern in the information leaks, all pointing away from you too perfectly? Roland's expression shifted from confident to calculating. This changes nothing, Magnus. The deal is made. Genomix's team is already moving on the settlement while you're out here with your most loyal warriors. There is no team moving on the settlement, Magnus countered. Your Silver Blade contacts were intercepted 20 minutes ago at the real evacuation point, the one I shared only with you, knowing you would betray it. For the first time, Roland's composure cracked. Impossible. I told them nothing about... You didn't need to, Catherine interjected, understanding dawning. The transmitter Samuel's been using. It wasn't just sending messages, it was being tracked. The Silver Blades have been monitoring all communications from it. Magnus nodded in confirmation. A simple matter to feed false information through channels we knew were compromised. Your Silver Blade allies walked into a trap of their own making. Roland's face twisted with rage. With inhuman speed, he lunged not at Magnus but at Catherine, clearly identifying her as the weakest target, or perhaps blaming her for the unraveling of his plans. Catherine barely had time to register the attack before Magnus intercepted Roland with devastating force, the two werewolves colliding in a blur of motion that sent them crashing into the underbrush. What followed was unlike anything Catherine had witnessed, a primal confrontation between dominant males that transcended human combat. They moved with supernatural speed and strength, neither fully shifting but both manifesting aspects of their wolf nature as they fought. Claws extended, teeth elongated into partial fangs, muscles rippling beneath skin in ways that defied normal anatomy. Despite Roland's ferocity, it quickly became apparent that Magnus outmatched him in both power and skill. The Alpha drove his lieutenant back with methodical precision, each blow weakening Roland's defenses until finally, with a decisive strike, Magnus sent him crashing to the forest floor. Roland lay gasping, blood streaming from multiple wounds, while Magnus stood over him virtually unmarked. The defeated lieutenant glared up with hatred. "Kill me then," he spat. "Prove your dominancy like the animal you are." Magnus regarded him with cold contempt. "Death would be too merciful. You betrayed the pack, violated our most sacred trust. You will face pack justice before the council." At a signal from Magnus, Darius and another warrior moved to secure Roland. Samuel, who had made no attempt to flee or fight, allowed himself to be taken without resistance, his aged face showing only weary resignation. As the prisoners were led away, Magnus approached Catherine and Lydia, his golden eyes still glinting with residual battle fury that gradually softened as he assessed them for injuries. "You're unharmed?" he asked, his gaze lingering on Catherine. "We're fine," she assured him. "How did you know?" "I didn't trust the false evacuation plan would be enough to expose the traitor. Too many variables." So I added another layer. I had you watched. He nodded toward the trees where Selena emerged. When Selena reported you were following Samuel, I realized we might have overlooked the less obvious suspect. "In the Silver Blades?" Lydia asked anxiously. "Captured or eliminated," Magnus confirmed grimly. Their team was small, clearly an advanced force for what they expected to be a larger operation. Catherine processed this information with mixed emotions, relief that the immediate threat had been neutralized, but awareness that this victory didn't end the larger conflict. "Roland mentioned genomics," she said, "a corporation backing the Silver Blades. This goes beyond traditional hunters." "Yes," Magnus acknowledged, "a new enemy for a new age. But one we now understand better, thanks to this night's revelations." They returned to the settlement as dawn broke over the valley, the soft light revealing the aftermath of the night's events. The captured Silver Blades had been secured in a reinforced structure at the settlement's edge. Roland and Samuel were held separately, under heavy guard. News of the betrayal spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the pack. Many found it difficult to believe that Roland, a respected lieutenant despite his abrasive personality, had been working with their enemies. Even more disturbing was Samuel's involvement, the trusted healer who had cared for generations of pack members. The council convened an emergency session, with Catherine invited to attend at Magnus's insistence. She sat quietly as the events were recounted, the evidence presented. Roland remained defiant, Samuel subdued. Both continued to insist that their actions had been necessary for the pack's long-term survival in a changing world. "Adaptation is not betrayal," Roland argued before the assembled elders. "The human world will find us eventually. Better to negotiate our place in it than be exterminated or worse." Helena, the first elder, regarded him with ancient, sorrowful eyes. "There are ways to adapt without sacrificing who and what we are, without selling our children to those who would dissect them for profit." "The traditional ways are dying," Samuel spoke up, his voice quavering with age but firm in conviction. "I've watched our numbers dwindle, our territories shrink, our young ones struggle to control their nature in a world that leaves less room for wildness each year." Roland offered a path to survival. "A path paved with the blood of your pack mates," Magnus countered coldly, "with cubs taken for experimentation, with weapons developed specifically to harm your own kind." The debate continued, laying bare the deep ideological divides within the pack about their future. Catherine listened with growing understanding of the complex pressures facing Silvercrest, not just from external enemies, but from the inexorable advance of human civilization into every corner of the wild world. Finally, judgment was rendered. Both traitors would face exile, not death, as many had expected, but permanent separation from the pack, with a ritual severing of pack bonds that Helena explained would be more painful than physical death for a werewolf. As the council dispersed, Catherine found herself walking alongside Magnus toward the lake shore, both of them processing the weight of all that had transpired. "You showed mercy," she observed. "Many wanted their deaths." "Death is final," Magnus replied. "Exile leaves them to contemplate the consequences of their choices for however long they live." His expression darkened. "And it sends a message to any others who might consider similar paths." They stopped at the water's edge, the late morning sun casting diamonds across the lake's surface. For a moment, neither spoke, sharing a rare moment of peace after the night's chaos. "What happens now?" Catherine finally asked, "with genomics still out there, aware of your existence?" "We adapt," Magnus said simply, "but on our terms, not theirs. We strengthen our defenses, develop countermeasures against their weapons, prepare for a longer struggle." He turned to face her directly. "Your knowledge will be vital to those efforts." The implication was clear. He expected her to stay, to continue working with Silver Crest against these new threats. Catherine found herself wanting exactly that, though the realization surprised her. When had this hidden valley of werewolves begun to feel more like home than her solitary cabin ever had? "I'll stay," she said, "for as long as I'm needed." Something shifted in Magnus's golden gaze, a warmth that transcended his usual reserved demeanor. "You've proven yourself a true ally to Silver Crest, Catherine Morgan. Few humans would have shown such courage or loyalty." "I found something here I thought I'd lost," she admitted. "Purpose. Connection." She hesitated, then added more softly, A place where my skills make a difference. They make more than a difference, Magnus said, his voice dropping to a register that sent an unexpected shiver through her. They've changed our understanding of what's possible, what collaboration between our kinds might achieve. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken potential. Then Magnus straightened, his alpha persona reasserting itself. There's something I need to show you, he said, something few outsiders have ever seen. Curious, Catherine followed him away from the settlement, along a hidden path that wound deeper into the valley than she had yet explored. They climbed steadily until reaching a concealed entrance in the mountainside, a narrow fissure that Magnus had to guide her through. Beyond lay a breathtaking sight, a vast cavern illuminated by strange phosphorescent crystals that grew from the walls and ceiling. The space hummed with subtle energy that Catherine felt rather than heard, raising the fine hairs on her arms. The heart chamber, Magnus explained, his voice taking on reverential quality. The source of our pack's strength and the center of our most sacred rituals. The place where our ancestors first made their covenant with the wolf spirits millennia ago. Catherine stood in awe, absorbing the ancient power that permeated the space. At the chamber center lay a pool of crystalline water that glowed with the same phosphorescence as the surrounding crystals. Why show me this? She asked softly, understanding the privilege being extended. Because you saved our future, Magnus replied simply. When you treated Elias, when you developed the Moonshadow root therapy for Arya, when you helped expose the traitors, each time you preserved something essential to our survival. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the sacred space. The elders believe you should understand what you've been fighting to protect. Catherine approached the glowing pool, drawn by its otherworldly beauty. The surface reflected her image back with strange clarity, but with subtle differences. Her eyes seemed to hold golden flecks that hadn't been there before. Her features somehow both familiar and transformed. The waters show us as we truly are, Magnus explained, joining her at the pool's edge, beyond surface appearances. Catherine stared at her reflection, transfixed by the suggestion of something wild awakening within her previously human self-image. Is this accurate? Am I changing somehow? Perhaps, Magnus acknowledged. Extended contact with our kind can have effects on receptive humans. Nothing dramatic, you won't suddenly sprout fur and fangs, but certain aspects of your perception, your instincts, may be enhancing. The revelation should have alarmed her, but Catherine found herself intrigued rather than frightened. She'd already noticed subtle changes, improved night vision, heightened sense of smell, moments of intuition that seemed almost supernatural in their accuracy. Is this why some of the pack have begun treating me differently? They can sense the change. Magnus nodded. They recognize the beginning of a bond. Not a mate bond, he added quickly, perhaps noting her startled expression, but a pack bond, rare for a human but not unprecedented. Catherine absorbed this information, understanding its significance. She wasn't just an ally to Silvercrest now, but potentially becoming something more. A true member, connected by bonds deeper than conscious choice. And you? She asked, meeting his golden gaze directly. What do you sense? Magnus held her gaze, the alpha's customary reserve slipping to reveal something more primal, more personal. I sense a warrior with a healer's heart, someone who has faced her own darkness and emerged stronger, someone who fits within our pack in ways neither of us anticipated. He stepped closer, reducing the space between them until Catherine could feel the heat radiating from his powerful frame. I sense someone who calls to both the man and the wolf within me, Catherine Morgan. The admission hung between them, charged with possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. Catherine had not allowed herself to acknowledge the growing attraction she felt toward the alpha, dismissing it as mere respect for his strength and leadership. Now, confronted with his open declaration, she could no longer deny her own feelings. I never expected this, she said softly. When I found Elias in the snow, when I discovered what you were, this connection wasn't part of any plan. The best connections rarely are, Magnus replied, his voice deepening. They grow from shared purpose, from trust earned in crisis, from seeing each other's true nature. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he raised a hand to her face, fingers tracing her cheek with surprising gentleness from one so powerful. Catherine leaned into the touch, her body responding to his proximity with a surge of awareness that transcended normal attraction. There would be challenges, Magnus continued, his thumb brushing her lower lip. A human and an alpha, unprecedented in our history. Some would object. Others would fear the implications. I've never been easily intimidated, Catherine reminded him, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. And I've faced disapproval before. A rare smile transformed Magnus's stern features. Yes, I imagine you have. The moment balanced on a knife's edge of possibility. But before either could act, a howl echoed through the cavern entrance, the distinct alarm call that signaled urgent pack business. Magnus tensed, the alpha instantly alert to his responsibilities. With visible reluctance, he stepped back, though his golden eyes still burned with unresolved intent. We must return, he said, but this conversation isn't finished, Catherine. I'll hold you to that, she replied, the promise in her voice matching his own. They emerged from the heart chamber to find Darius waiting anxiously on the path. His expression was grim as he addressed Magnus. The prisoners have provided information, Alpha. Genomics isn't finished with us. They have Elias's blood samples and they've made progress with their research. According to Roland, they're developing a compound that could suppress shifting abilities permanently. The implications were horrifying. A chemical means to strip werewolves of half their nature, to force assimilation by eliminating their wolf aspect entirely. Where is this research being conducted? Magnus demanded. A facility in the mountains 50 miles east, heavily secured, but Roland knows the access protocols. Darius hesitated. He's offering the information in exchange for leniency. Magnus's expression hardened. He betrays his collaborators as easily as he betrayed his pack. Bring him to the council chamber. We'll hear what he knows. As they descended toward the settlement, Catherine's mind raced with the strategic implications. A direct assault on a corporate research facility would be dangerous, possibly suicidal, but allowing their research to continue posed an existential threat to all werewolves. In the council chamber, Roland sat bound but defiant, clearly believing his information gave him leverage. Samuel was absent, having apparently revealed all he knew already. The facility is built into the mountain itself, Roland explained, after Magnus grudgingly agreed to hear him out. State-of-the-art security, but designed primarily to keep people out, not werewolves specifically. I can provide entry codes, guard rotations, the location of their main research laboratory. Why would you betray your genomics allies now? Catherine asked, suspicious of his sudden cooperation. Roland's eyes flickered to her, his contempt visible but tempered by new wariness. I wanted partnership with humans, not extinction. Their lead scientist, Dr. Victor Hawthorne, has become obsessed. His initial goal was to develop treatments for uncontrolled shifting, but he's gone far beyond that now. He wants to eradicate the wolf nature entirely, sees it as a cure for our kind. And you object to this only now? Magnus's voice dripped skepticism. I learned of this development recently, Roland insisted. It wasn't part of our original arrangement. Genomics promised sanctuary, protection, medical benefits, not annihilation of half our nature. Catherine studied him carefully, sensing partial truth mixed with self-serving justification. There's more you're not telling us. Roland's gaze shifted away momentarily, a tell that confirmed her suspicion. Hawthorne has personal motivations beyond corporate profit. His son was attacked by a rogue werewolf years ago, transformed against his will. The boy can't control his shifts, exists in a state of perpetual torment. Hawthorne's cure was developed primarily for him. This revelation added complexity to what had seemed a straightforward tale of corporate greed. A father desperate to help his suffering child, Catherine could understand such motivation, even while condemning the methods. Where is this son now, she asked. At the facility, Roland replied. In a specialized containment unit, Hawthorne keeps him close, uses his blood for ongoing research. Magnus absorbed this information in grim silence, then addressed the council. We must act quickly. If this cure is distributed beyond their facility, it could threaten all werewolf packs, not just Silver Crest. The elders nodded in solemn agreement. Helena spoke for them all. A strike team must be assembled, the research destroyed, their test subjects freed. I'll lead the mission, Magnus declared, brooking no argument. Darius, Selena, and our best warriors will accompany me. Catherine stepped forward. I should go too. My medical knowledge could be crucial, especially if we're freeing test subjects who may be injured or affected by experimental compounds. Magnus looked like he wanted to refuse, to keep her safely away from the dangerous mission. But strategic necessity won out over personal concern. Very well, but you stay behind the warriors at all times. The council session adjourned. With preparations to begin immediately for the assault on Genomix's facility. Roland was returned to confinement, his final fate still undecided pending the mission's outcome. As the others dispersed to their tasks, Magnus drew Catherine aside, his expression torn between his responsibilities as Alpha and his personal concerns. This mission will be dangerous beyond anything you have faced with us so far, he warned. These are not superstitious hunters, but corporate mercenaries with advanced weapons and training. I was a combat medic in Afghanistan, Catherine reminded him. I've worked in hot zones before. Magnus's golden eyes searched hers. This is different. If anything happened to you, he stopped, seeming to struggle with uncharacteristic emotion. Catherine reached up, resting her palm against his cheek in a mirror of his earlier gesture in the heart chamber. I'll be careful, but this is too important for me to stay behind. Hawthorne's son needs help from someone who understands both human medicine and werewolf physiology. And if other test subjects have been affected by this cure, they'll need specialized treatment. Magnus covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to press his lips against her palm in a gesture so intimate it sent heat coursing through her. Then we go together, he conceded. But when we return, the promise in his eyes needed no verbal completion. When we return, Catherine agreed softly. They parted to prepare for the mission, each carrying the weight of their unresolved connection alongside their tactical responsibilities. Catherine gathered medical supplies with Lydia, who would remain behind to care for the pack, but provided valuable insight into what treatments might be needed for werewolves subjected to experimental procedures. By nightfall, the strike team was assembled. Magnus, Darius, Selena, 5 other elite warriors, and Catherine. All were armed with both traditional weapons and modern firearms, prepared for whatever resistance they might encounter. Before their departure, Helena performed a blessing ritual, anointing each team member with sacred oils from the heart chamber. When she reached Catherine, the ancient elder paused, her golden eyes widening slightly as she applied the oil to Catherine's forehead. The waters have touched you already, she murmured, too low for others to hear. You carry the heart's blessing even before mine. She completed the ritual with a knowing smile. Return safely, daughter of 2 worlds. Silvercrest has need of your bridging spirit in the days ahead. With these cryptic words resonating in her mind, Catherine joined the strike team as they moved out under cover of darkness, heading toward a confrontation that would determine not just Silvercrest's future, but perhaps the fate of all werewolves in this changing world. The mountains never forget a debt, neither do wolves. And Catherine Morgan, healer caught between worlds, knew that before this night was through, those ancient debts would be called due in blood and fire and transformation.